You want us to pay how much? Admiral Tessa Jackson leaned forward, her weathered face contorted into what diplomatic advisors called her about-to-murder-someone expression. The Galactic Council representative, a gelatinous mass of translucent purple goo contained within an environmental suit that resembled a fancy trash can, wobbled slightly. The wobble was the Murixilpalex equivalent of an indignant huff. The protection fee is non-negotiable, human, it burbled through its translator. 50 trillion galactic credits, annually. Your species has been utilizing Council-controlled space lanes without proper authorization for nearly 3 Earth decades. The accumulated penalties alone would bankrupt your entire economy. Captain Lee snorted beside Jackson. That's convenient. We didn't even know you existed until last Tuesday, but somehow we've been accumulating fines since the 2080s? The Murixilpalex representative, who had introduced himself as Grand Executor Blex TPTZs, but whom Jackson had mentally renamed Purple Bastard, rippled dismissively. Ignorance of galactic law is not a valid defense. The beacon warning of the toll requirements has been broadcasting at the edge of your solar system since before your species discovered fire. Jackson exchanged glances with the other 4 members of humanity's hastily assembled First Contact team. Dr. Kwan, their xenobiologist, was furiously taking notes. General Thompson looked like he was calculating missile trajectories in his head. Ambassador Joe maintained a perfect poker face, and Lee, their pilot and resident smartass, was barely suppressing laughter. "And where exactly is this beacon?" Jackson asked. "The 6th planet in your system, the one with the rings." "Saturn? You put a toll booth on Saturn?" Lee couldn't contain himself anymore. "And you expected us to find it? How? We only sent our first proper probe there in the 1970s. Purple Bastard swelled indignantly. "The beacon is programmed to make itself known to any civilization that achieves space travel." "Clearly it's malfunctioning then," Ambassador Joe said smoothly, finally breaking her silence. "Because we've had robots on Saturn's moons for decades now. No beacon." "Then your technology is primitive and defective," Purple Bastard snapped. Jackson felt her patience, never her strongest virtue, rapidly evaporating. The entire situation was absurd. After centuries of wondering if we were alone in the universe, humanity's first official contact with an alien civilization was a collection notice. "Let me get this straight," she said, deliberately keeping her voice level. "You're demanding 50 trillion credits. Per Earth year," Purple Bastard interjected. "Per year, for using space lanes that we didn't know existed, based on the authority of a council we've never heard of, because we missed a toll notice on a planet we've barely explored?" "Precisely. I'm pleased we understand each other." Lee snickered. "Oh, we understand you perfectly." Purple Bastard wobbled again, this time in what appeared to be satisfaction. "Excellent. The Council will expect the first payment within 1 standard galactic cycle, approximately 47 of your Earth days. Failure to comply will result in the impoundment of all human vessels in Council space and potential quarantine of your entire system." With that, the alien's environmental suit emitted a soft chime, and it began to drift toward the exit of the conference room aboard the International Space Station where this farcical meeting was taking place. "Hold up, Jello Shot," Jackson called out. "We haven't agreed to anything." Purple Bastard paused, rotating slowly. "Agreement is irrelevant. The law is the law." Ambassador Joe stepped forward. "We'll need time to consult with our governments." "Of course. As I said, 47 days. After the alien had departed, presumably back to whatever vessel had brought it to Earth orbit, the 5 humans sat in stunned silence. Lee was the first to speak. "Well, that went well. First contact, and we're being extorted by sentient slime in a fancy trash can." "This isn't extortion," General Thompson growled. "It's a declaration of war." Dr. Kwan looked up from her tablet. "Not necessarily. This could be a standard procedure for them. Maybe they genuinely believe we've been breaking their rules. Or," Joe suggested, her voice perfectly calm, "it's a test, to see how we respond." Jackson nodded slowly. "That's my take too, and I'd bet my pension that Purple Bastard isn't the only one watching." "Purple Bastard?" Lee grinned. "I was going with Grimace's evil twin, but yours works too." "The real question," Joe continued, ignoring the banter, "is what do we do now?" Jackson stared at the stars visible through the conference room's viewport. Humanity had only recently established a permanent lunar colony, with Mars exploration still in its early stages. And now, They were facing demands from an alien government that could apparently restrict their access to space. "We do what humans have always done," she said finally. "We improvise, adapt, and find a way to tell this council to go fuck themselves. Diplomatically, of course." Lee raised an imaginary glass. "I'll drink to that." 3 days later, in a secure underground facility beneath Geneva, representatives from every spacefaring nation on Earth gathered to address the crisis. The atmosphere was tense, with arguments breaking out in multiple languages. "We can't possibly pay." The European Space Agency director was red-faced. 50 trillion credits? We don't even know what a galactic credit is worth." According to the conversion rate purple, the Mercer XL PLX representative provided, the Chinese delegation head replied, "It's approximately 80 quadrillion US dollars. This announcement was met with stunned silence, followed by a burst of incredulous laughter from the Brazilian representative. "That's more money than exists on Earth. It's insanity." "Precisely," Joe said, standing at the podium. "Which is why we believe this is either a mistake, a test, or a deliberate provocation. Or a scam," Jackson added from her seat beside Joe. "We've been researching what little information the Mirrex LPLX shared about this Galactic Council. It's suspiciously vague. No membership roster, no charter, no publicly available laws or regulations." "You think we're being conned by aliens?" someone called out. Jackson shrugged. "Wouldn't be the strangest thing that's happened this week." Dr. Kwan stepped up to the podium. "We've been analyzing the Nemstrex LPLX's communication patterns. There are inconsistencies that suggest deception, though it's difficult to be certain with an alien psychology." "So what do we do?" The NASA administrator looked grim. "If they can enforce this quarantine they're threatening, then humanity is effectively imprisoned in our own solar system," Thompson finished. "Which we cannot allow." "We have 44 days left to respond," Joe reminded them. "I suggest we use them wisely." The next 6 weeks were the busiest of Jackson's life. While world leaders debated and diplomats prepared, the military and scientific communities were working around the clock on more practical responses. On day 46, exactly 1 day before the deadline, humanity delivered its answer. Jackson stood on the bridge of the USS Defiant, Earth's newest and most advanced spacecraft. Officially classified as a deep space research vessel, it had been hastily modified with experimental technology that, until 3 days ago, hadn't existed outside of theoretical physics labs. "Status report," she ordered, watching as the Earth shrank behind them. The Defiant had already broken all human speed records, crossing the lunar orbit in minutes rather than days. "All systems nominal, Admiral," her XO reported. "Quantum displacement drive operating within expected parameters. We'll reach the rendezvous coordinates in approximately 17 minutes. Lee grinned from the pilot's seat. "Not bad for tech we invented last weekend, huh?" The truth was, humanity had been working on theoretical faster-than-light propulsion for decades. The Mr. XLPLX's arrival had simply provided the missing piece of the puzzle: observation of an actual working FTL system. Dr. Kwan's team had recorded everything about the alien vessel, and Earth's best minds had reverse-engineered the basics in record time. It wasn't pretty and it wasn't perfect, but it worked. And more importantly, it sent a message. Humans don't take kindly to threats. "Approaching coordinates," Lee announced as the ship decelerated. "And look who's waiting for us." On the view screen, a massive vessel shaped like an elongated diamond hung against the blackness of space. It dwarfed the Defiant by at least a factor of 20. "The Council vessel is hailing us," Communications Officer Park announced. "On screen," Jackson ordered, straightening her uniform. Purple Bastard appeared on the display, his gelatinous form quivering with what Jackson had learned was surprise. "Human vessels are not authorized for faster-than-light travel," he burbled immediately. "This is a serious violation of—" "Good morning to you too," Jackson interrupted. "Or whatever time of day it is for you. Hard to tell when you're basically sentient jello." The alien's translator emitted a series of discordant beeps that might have been indignation. "Have you brought the first payment installment?" "About that," Jackson smiled. The kind of smile that had made hardened soldiers step back. "We've discussed your demand with our governments. We have a counteroffer." "There is no negotiation possible. The fee is 0, Jackson stated flatly. "We'll pay exactly 0 credits. The alien's translucent body darkened several shades of purple. "This is unacceptable. The consequences will be—" "Let me finish," Jackson said, her voice sharp enough to cut diamond. "We're not paying because your entire premise is flawed. You claim we've been using Council space lanes, but according to interstellar navigation records we've acquired. Earth isn't anywhere near a designated trade route. The alien wobbled violently. Furthermore, Jackson continued, the beacon you mentioned? We found it. It wasn't on Saturn. It was on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. And it wasn't broadcasting anything. It appears to have been offline for approximately 40,000 years, based on our analysis. This wasn't entirely true. They had found something on Titan that might be alien in origin, but they were still studying it. But Purple Bastard didn't need to know that. This is irrelevant, the alien insisted, though his wobbling had taken on a distinctly nervous quality. The Council's authority is absolute. Is it? Jackson smiled again. Because we've been doing some research, there are at least 17 interstellar legal codes that apply to first contact scenarios. All of them prohibit exactly the kind of extortion you're attempting. How could you possibly know that? The alien's translator couldn't quite capture the incredulity, but it was clear in the way his entire body pulsated. Dr. Kwan stepped into frame beside Jackson. We're quick studies. The truth was more complicated. During the past 6 weeks, while humanity's official representatives had been deliberating, covert teams had made contact with other spacefaring species. Turns out, Earth wasn't quite as isolated as they'd been led to believe, and not everyone in the galaxy was a fan of the Council. Let me be perfectly clear, Jackson said, leaning closer to the screen. Humanity isn't paying a single credit. Not now, not ever. If you want to quarantine our system, go ahead and try. But be aware that we've established relationships with the Arcturian Confederation, the Rigelian Trade Alliance, and the Tau Ceti Defense League. This was a bluff. They'd made exactly one alien friend, a trader from a species called the Gex Art, who had been delighted to share information in exchange for Earth chocolate and classic rock music. But Purple Bastard didn't know that. This is highly irregular, the alien said, his wobbling now distinctly anxious. I will need to consult with the full council. You do that. Jackson nodded. And while you're at it, you might want to look into why a low-level functionary was sent to attempt a scam on a newly contacted species. Because that's what this is, isn't it? There is no protection fee. You were hoping we'd panic and pay up before we realized we were being conned. The alien's body had gone almost completely still. Apparently the Murexel PLX equivalent of being caught red-handed. We'll await the full council's response, Jackson finished. But in the meantime, consider humanity's solar system open for legitimate trade and diplomacy. Anyone attempting to blockade us will be considered hostile. Are we clear? Perfectly, the alien replied, its voice now much less confident. We apologize for the unfortunate first impression. Zekt's mandibles clicked in what they had been told was embarrassment. The actions of Executor Blex TPTs were unauthorized and illegal. He has been apprehended and will face justice. Good to know, Jackson commented. What happened to to Blex TPTs anyway? He is currently undergoing chemical reconfiguration. One of the other delegates, a being that appeared to be made of living crystal, chimed in. The Misrexelplex consider it the highest form of punishment. Jackson decided not to ask for details. Some things were better left to the imagination. We have come to formally invite Earth to join the Galactic Council as a probationary member, Zekt continued. Your species has demonstrated remarkable adaptability. The way the alien emphasized that last word made it clear that adaptability was a polite euphemism for something else, possibly terrifying unpredictability. We're honored, Joe replied. But before we accept, we'd like to understand exactly what council membership entails, including any fees or obligations. Zek's compound eyes flickered with what might have been amusement. A reasonable precaution, I assure you. Legitimate council membership involves no protection fees. There is an annual administrative contribution based on economic output, but for a developing world like Earth, it would be minimal. And the benefits? Jackson asked. Access to council technology, trade routes, diplomatic protection, cultural exchange. There are many, Zekt replied. But perhaps the most immediate benefit is that council members agree not to annihilate each other. There was an uncomfortable silence. Is that a common occurrence? Joe asked carefully. The crystalline delegate chimed again. More common than we would prefer. The galaxy can be contentious. Jackson and Joe exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of information they needed. We appreciate your candor, Joe said. Earth will consider your invitation carefully. In the meantime, we would welcome establishing formal diplomatic relations and preliminary trade agreements. Agreed. Zekt's mandibles clicked in approval. We look forward to learning more about humanity. Your species has generated considerable interest among council members. Oh? Jackson raised an eyebrow. What kind of interest? You developed functional faster-than-light technology in 6 weeks, the crystalline being pointed out. Most species take centuries. Some find this concerning. Lee, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the meeting, grinned. Wait till they see what we've done with their communications tech. Jackson shot him a warning look, but the damage was done. You've improved Council technology? Sect's antennae quivered with what might have been alarm. Zhou smoothly intervened. We've been experimenting with various applications that might be better suited to human physiology. Nothing dramatic. This was an enormous understatement. Earth's scientists had been taking apart and reassembling alien technology like children with new toys, improving efficiency by an average of 300% in most cases. I see, Sect said, in a tone that suggested he very much did see, and wasn't entirely comfortable with what he was seeing. This is unusual. That's humanity for you, Jackson said with a shrug. We're quick learners, so we're observing, Sect replied. The Council will be watching your development with great interest. As the meeting concluded and the delegates filed out, Lee leaned over to Jackson. Was it just me, or did that sound vaguely threatening? Not threatening, Jackson murmured. Nervous. They're afraid of us? Lee looked incredulous. We've barely left our solar system. Dr. Kwan, who had been silently taking notes throughout the meeting, looked up. They're not afraid of what we are. They're afraid of what we might become. 1 year later, humanity had established diplomatic relations with 27 alien species, set up trading posts on 4 different planets, and built a fleet of 50 FTL-capable vessels. Earth's technology had advanced decades in months, and its economy was booming from the influx of alien knowledge and resources. Jackson stood in the observation lounge of Harmony Station, Earth's first off-world diplomatic hub, watching ships from a dozen different species dock and depart. The station orbited a neutral point between Earth and Alpha Centauri, making it convenient for multiple civilizations. Admiring your handiwork? Joe asked, joining her at the window. Jackson smiled. Just thinking about how much has changed. A year ago, we were being extorted by a purple blob in a trash can. Now look at us. We've been lucky, Joe cautioned. Not everyone in the galaxy is happy about humanity's rapid rise. The Council seems satisfied with our progress, Jackson pointed out. We were granted full membership 3 months ahead of schedule. The Council is pragmatic. They'd rather have us inside their tent pissing out, as the old saying goes. Jackson laughed. Ambassador Joe, I'm shocked. Such colorful language from our chief diplomat. Joe's normally composed expression cracked into a rare smile. I've been spending too much time with Captain Lee, apparently. Speaking of Lee, he chose that moment to enter the lounge, accompanied by a tall, feathered alien that resembled a cross between an ostrich and a velociraptor. Admiral Ambassador, Lee called out. Have you met Karith, trade minister from the Aviar cluster? He's a huge fan of Earth music. The alien bowed its long neck in greeting. Your species' ability to combine rhythm and melody is unparalleled, it trilled. Particularly the one you call Queen, most transcendent. Jackson exchanged an amused glance with Joe. Cultural exchange had been one of the more unexpected benefits of first contact. Earth's art, music, literature, and even food had proven immensely popular among certain alien societies. Karith has an interesting proposition, Lee continued. The Aviar are offering exclusive mining rights in their asteroid belt in exchange for... what was it again? The complete recorded works of your musical artists, plus regular updates as new compositions emerge, Karith trilled excitedly. A fair exchange, yes? Joe didn't bat an eye. We'll certainly consider it, Minister Karith. Perhaps we could discuss details over dinner? As Joe led the enthusiastic alien away, Lee sidled up to Jackson. Can you believe it? They're willing to trade valuable mineral rights for our Spotify catalog. Different species, different values. Jackson shrugged. They find our music as exotic as we find their technology. Speaking of technology, Lee lowered his voice. Thompson wanted me to tell you, the prototype is ready. Jackson's expression turned serious. Already? The estimate said 3 more months at least. Yeah, well, turns out those Rigelian quantum processors work better with Earth superconductors than anyone expected. The engineering team is calling it a happy accident. I'm calling it a game changer. The prototype was humanity's first entirely Earth-designed FTL vessel, incorporating lessons learned from alien technology, but built with human innovation. If it worked as projected, it would be twice as fast and 3 times as energy efficient as anything currently in the Council's fleet. This stays quiet for now, Jackson ordered. The Council is already watching us like hawks. The last thing we need is to trigger an arms race. Too late for that, came a familiar voice from behind them. Jackson turned to see Dr. Kwan approaching, tablet in hand as always. After a year of alien interaction, the xenobiologist had become one of Earth's most valuable assets, her understanding of extraterrestrial psychology and biology unmatched. What do you mean? Jackson asked. Kwan glanced around before responding, making sure they weren't overheard. I've been analyzing Council communication patterns. There's been a significant uptick in encrypted transmissions between military outposts in the past 3 weeks, and the Arcturians have recalled half their merchant fleet for scheduled maintenance. That doesn't necessarily mean, Lee began. The Geexart Trading Guild has raised insurance rates on cargo traveling near Earth by 300%, Kwan cut in. They only do that when they anticipate conflict. Jackson felt a chill run down her spine. Are we looking at a preemptive strike against Earth? Kwan shook her head. I don't think so. At least, not immediately. But the Council races are definitely preparing for something. We need more information, Jackson decided. Lee, contact our GXRRT friend, see what he knows. Kwan, compile a report for the Security Council. I want all our defense systems on high alert, but discreetly. No need to panic the public. As her officers hurried away, Jackson turned back to the observation window. The peaceful scene of ships coming and going suddenly seemed more fragile, more tenuous. Problem? Joe had returned, having presumably handed off the AVR minister to some junior diplomat. Maybe, Jackson admitted. Kwan thinks the Council races might be preparing for conflict. Joe's expression remained calm, but her eyes sharpened. With us? Or with each other? That's the question, isn't it? We're still too new to galactic politics to really understand all the currents. Perhaps, Joe mused, it's time we created some currents of our own. Jackson raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? The Galactic Council has maintained equilibrium for thousands of years through a careful balance of power and mutual deterrence. No single species can dominate because the others would unite against them. Basic power politics, Jackson nodded. Same as Earth. Yes, but Earth has something the Council races don't. What's that? Joe smiled thinly. Humans. 2 days later, Jackson found herself in a secure conference room deep within Harmony Station, facing some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. It wasn't an official council meeting, more of a private conversation between interested parties. Zacht represented the Vesperi Collective. Beside him sat X-Lor, the crystalline being from the original delegation, representing the Silicon Concordat. 3 other alien representatives completed the gathering. An aquatic creature in a hovering water tank from the Oceanic Worlds Alliance, a gaseous entity contained in an environmental suit from the Nebula Consciousness, and a small, furry mammalian being representing the Proxima Coalition. We appreciate your willingness to meet discreetly, Admiral Jackson. Zizekt began, mandibles clicking softly. What you're about to hear is not official council policy. I understand, Jackson nodded. This is off the record, X-Lor chimed, the translator rendering its crystalline resonances into speech. We have become concerned about certain factions within the council, particularly the Tauran Imperium. Jackson kept her expression neutral. The Taurans were one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy, though Earth had yet to establish direct diplomatic relations with them. What about them? She asked. They are expanding aggressively into previously neutral systems, the aquatic delegate burbled through its translator. Resource acquisition beyond their needs, fleet movements without explanation. The classic signs of preparation for large-scale conflict, the gaseous entity added, its voice rendered as a whispery hiss. And you're telling me this because... Jackson let the question hang. Zacht's compound eyes flickered. Humanity has demonstrated remarkable technological growth and adaptability. You have also maintained neutrality in long-standing council disputes. You want an alliance, Jackson stated flatly. Earth's support if the Taurans make a move. Not precisely, the small furry delegate squeaked. We seek a deterrent. The knowledge that humanity would not align with the Taurans might be enough to prevent conflict. Jackson leaned back, considering. This was exactly the kind of complex interstellar politics they'd been trying to avoid. Earth was still too vulnerable, too new to the galactic stage to be taking sides in conflicts between ancient civilizations. but neutrality might not be an option much longer. What do the Taurans want? She asked finally. The delegates exchanged glances. Dominance, Exilor chimed eventually. The Tauran philosophy rejects the cooperative model of the Council. They believe in natural hierarchies, with themselves at the apex. They've been contained for millennia by the balance of power, Sect added. But something has changed. Their recent activities suggest they believe they have found an advantage. A new weapon? Jackson asked, immediately thinking of Earth's own prototype. Unknown, the aquatic delegate burbled. But their confidence is concerning. Jackson thought carefully before responding. Earth couldn't afford to be drawn into an interstellar conflict, but it also couldn't afford to be caught unprepared if one erupted. I appreciate the information, she said finally, but Earth isn't in a position to make formal commitments in a potential conflict. Our primary concern must be the safety of our own system. The delegate's body language, varied as it was across species, suggested disappointment but not surprise. However, Jackson continued, Earth has no interest in seeing the balance of power destabilized. We would be willing to participate in joint defensive exercises, purely as a precaution, of course. This was a calculated offer. It would allow Earth to gauge the military capabilities of potential allies without committing to an actual alliance. Acceptable, Zucht clicked, antennae quivering with what might have been relief. We will arrange a suitable scenario. As the meeting concluded and the delegates filed out, Jackson remained seated, turning over this new information. If a galactic conflict was brewing, Earth needed to be prepared. But they also needed more information about the Taurans, about these potential allies, about everything. She activated her secure comm. Lee, I need you to accelerate the prototype testing and find me everything we have on the Tauran Imperium. The Tauran embassy on Harmony Station was notably austere compared to the other diplomatic quarters. While most species decorated their spaces with art, plants, or cultural artifacts, the Taurans preferred stark minimalism, bare walls, functional furniture, and lighting that seemed deliberately set to uncomfortable levels. Zhu sat perfectly straight, maintaining her diplomatic composure despite the chair that seemed designed to induce discomfort. Across from her, the Tauran ambassador loomed, a tall, gray-skinned humanoid with features that seemed chiseled from stone. Ambassador Nekrath, Zhou began, thank you for agreeing to meet. Time is valuable, human, the Tauran replied, voice like gravel. State your purpose. Zhou had dealt with difficult diplomatic counterparts throughout her career, but the Taurans elevated rudeness to an art form. Still, she maintained her professional demeanor. Earth is concerned about increasing tensions within the Council. As a neutral party, we wish to understand all perspectives. Nekrath's pupilless eyes narrowed. There is only one relevant perspective. The weak fear strength. It is the natural order. And the Tauran Imperium represents strength? Zhou asked mildly. We represent inevitability, Nekrath stated. For 10,000 years, the Council has maintained a false equilibrium, preventing natural selection from determining the superior civilization. This artificial constraint approaches its end. Zhou carefully kept her expression neutral. The Tauran wasn't even bothering to deny their expansionist intentions. Conflict between advanced civilizations rarely benefits anyone, she pointed out. Surely cooperation has proven its value over competition? Nekrath made a sound that might have been a laugh, though it contained no humor. A philosophy of prey species. The strong do not cooperate with the weak. They dominate or eliminate them. And where does humanity fit in this worldview? Zhou asked directly. Are we strong or weak? For the first time, the Tauran's expression shifted slightly, a subtle tensing around the eyes. Humanity is undetermined. Your rapid technological advancement suggests potential strength. Your diplomatic overtures suggest weakness. The outcome remains to be seen. I see, Zhou nodded. And if humanity chose to align with those civilizations opposing Tauran expansion, then you would share their fate, Nekrath said flatly. But I do not believe you will. Your species is pragmatic. Self-preservation will guide you to the correct choice when the time comes. Zhou stood, recognizing that the meeting had reached its useful conclusion. Thank you for your candor, Ambassador. Earth will consider all options carefully. Do so quickly, human, Nekrath replied. Events move forward with or without your decision. As Zhou left the Tauran embassy, a chill ran down her spine. There had been no attempt at diplomatic niceties, no pretense of peaceful intentions. The Taurans were openly preparing for conflict, and they seemed utterly confident in their success, which meant they either had overwhelming force or a secret weapon. Neither boded well for galactic stability. They basically admitted they're planning to start a war, Joe reported to the emergency meeting of Earth's Security Council later that day. No pretense, no diplomatic doublespeak, just the strong will dominate the weak. Jackson frowned. That level of confidence is concerning. The council races have maintained a balance of power for millennia. What's changed? Perhaps this, Dr. Kwan said, activating a holographic display in the center of the table. A complex molecule rotated slowly above them. Our GXRT contacts smuggled this data out of a Tauran research facility. They're calling it transcendence. What are we looking at? General Thompson asked, leaning forward. A neurochemical compound that dramatically enhances certain brain functions in compatible species, Kwan explained. According to the limited data we have, it increases processing speed, memory retention, and pattern recognition by a factor of 10. A superintelligence drug? Lee whistled. That would definitely change the equation. Especially because the Taurans appear to be universally compatible with it, Kwan continued, while most other council races are not. So they're creating an army of superintelligent soldiers, Thompson growled. Perfect. Not just soldiers, Kwan corrected. Scientists, strategists, engineers, they're elevating their entire civilization. The military applications are just the most immediate concern. Jackson tapped her fingers on the table thoughtfully. What about humans? Are we compatible? Kwan hesitated. Based on preliminary analysis, yes. Our neurochemistry is surprisingly similar to Taurans in key areas. But the compound appears highly experimental. The side effects could be devastating: permanent neural damage, personality alterations, possibly even death. So not an option for us, Thompson stated. Not in its current form, Kwan agreed, though our scientists might be able to modify it given time. Joe, who had been silently processing all this information, finally spoke. We're missing the larger picture. If the Taurans launch a full-scale conflict with this advantage, the Council could fracture. Even if Earth remains neutral, the resulting chaos would eventually reach us. So what do you suggest? Jackson asked. Taking sides in an interstellar war when we've barely left our solar system isn't exactly a winning strategy. Lee leaned forward. What if we don't have to take sides? What if we change the game entirely? All eyes turned to him. Explain, Thompson demanded. The Taurans think they have an unbeatable advantage with this transcendence drug, Lee said. But their advantage is only unbeatable if they're the only ones who have it. You're suggesting we steal it? Jackson frowned. Even if we could, we just established it's too dangerous to use. Not steal it, Lee grinned. Share it. Joe caught on immediately. Information warfare. We expose the Tauran secret to the other council races. Exactly, Lee nodded. The Taurans are counting on the element of surprise. Take that away, and suddenly the playing field looks different. The other council races still wouldn't be compatible, Kwan pointed out. But they'd have time to prepare countermeasures, Thompson said, warming to the idea. And they'd know exactly what they're facing. More importantly, Joe added, it would force the Taurans to accelerate their timeline or risk losing their advantage. Rushed plans are sloppy plans. Jackson considered the proposal. It was risky. The Taurans would immediately suspect Earth's involvement. But the alternative was waiting for an interstellar war to erupt with Earth caught in the middle. We'd need absolute proof, she said finally. Something incontrovertible that we could broadcast to all council races simultaneously. Leave that to me, Joe smiled thinly. Diplomatic channels have their uses. 3 days later, Joe stood before the full Galactic Council in its massive chamber on the neutral station Concordia. Representatives from all 37 member species were present, a rare occurrence that underscored the gravity of the situation. The Council recognizes Ambassador Joe of Earth, the chair being announced, its species indeterminate within its environmental suit. Thank you, Chairbing, Joe bowed slightly. Earth comes before the Council with grave concerns about threats to galactic stability. From the Tauran section, Ambassador Nekrath rose. This is irregular. Earth has no standing to raise security matters as a probationary member. On the contrary, Joe replied smoothly. Article 17 of the Council Charter explicitly grants any member the right to present evidence of actions threatening multiple civilizations. The chamber erupted in murmurs as delegates consulted with advisors and each other. The ambassador from Earth is correct, the chair being ruled after consulting a data panel. Proceed, Ambassador Joe. Joe activated a projector, and the molecular structure of transcendence appeared above the chamber floor, rotating slowly. This compound, developed in secret by the Tauran Imperium, represents a fundamental threat to Council stability, she stated calmly. It enhances neural function by a factor of 10 in compatible species, primarily taurons, creating an insurmountable military and technological advantage. Necrath stood again, his gray face darkening with rage. This is an outrageous violation of sovereignty. Earth has engaged in espionage against a council member. The information came to us through legitimate diplomatic channels, Joe lied smoothly. In reality, the data had been extracted by a joint Earth GXRT covert operation that had nearly ended in disaster. But the source is less important than the implication. The Tauran Imperium has been preparing for aggressive expansion throughout Council space. As evidence, Joe displayed intercepted Tauran fleet movements, resource stockpiling records, and most damning of all, internal communications discussing the inevitable ascendance of the superior species. The council chamber descended into chaos as delegates shouted accusations and demanded explanations. The chair being struggled to maintain order. "This is a fabrication!" Necrath roared above the din. "Earth seeks to destabilize the council for its own benefit." "What benefit would that bring us?" Joe asked, her voice cutting through the noise. "Earth is the newest, most vulnerable council member. Instability threatens us more than anyone." "Then what do you propose, Ambassador?" the chair being asked when order was partially restored. "Three things," Joe replied. "First, an immediate council inspection of all Tauran research facilities. Second, the formula for transcendence to be shared with all council races for independent verification and potential adaptation for medical uses. Third, a temporary restriction on Tauran fleet movements until this matter is resolved." Necrath's expression was thunderous. "The Tauran Imperium rejects these demands categorically. We will not submit to inspection or restrictions based on fabricated evidence." "Then perhaps," Joe suggested mildly, "the Imperium would prefer to address the evidence directly. Explain these fleet movements, these stockpiles, these communications." The Tauran ambassador stood silent, clearly calculating his options. "If I may," Tsukt of the Vesperi rose, compound eyes flickering. "The council cannot ignore such serious allegations. I propose a formal inquiry with representatives from all major council factions." A chorus of agreements followed, with only the Tauran delegation and their closest allies objecting. "The motion carries," the chair being announced. "A formal inquiry will commence immediately. Until its conclusion, all council races are urged to maintain current positions and avoid provocative actions." Joe bowed again. "Earth thanks the council for its wisdom." As she turned to leave the chamber, she caught Necrath's eye. The Tauran's expression promised retribution. It was a promise Joe fully expected him to keep. "They're mobilizing," Lee reported grimly. "Our long-range sensors are picking up massive fleet movements throughout Tauran space." Jackson studied the tactical display in Harmony Station's command center. It had been 4 days since Joe's presentation to the council, and things were deteriorating rapidly. "So much for the council's call for restraint," she muttered. "Are the other factions responding?" "The Vesperi and Silicon Concordat have activated their defense grids," Thompson confirmed. "The Oceanic Alliance is recalling their ships. Everyone's preparing for the worst." "And Earth?" Jackson asked. "Home defense grid is at full capacity," Thompson replied. "The lunar colonies have been placed on alert, and Mars Outpost is implementing contingency protocols. We've recalled all deep space vessels except for the ones we can't reach in time." "What about diplomatic channels?" Jackson turned to Joe, who looked exhausted after days of non-stop negotiations. "Deadlocked," she sighed. "The council is split between those demanding Tauran compliance and those urging caution. Meanwhile, the inquiry team hasn't even been able to enter Tauran space. They're being blocked at every border checkpoint." "So we're looking at war," Jackson stated flatly. "Not necessarily," Dr. Kwan interjected. She had been quietly working at a console in the corner. "There may be another option." All eyes turned to her. "I've been analyzing the transcendence formula," she explained, bringing up a molecular model on the main display. "It's brilliant work, but fundamentally flawed." "Flawed how?" Thompson demanded. "The neural enhancement is temporary," Kwan explained. "And each subsequent dose becomes less effective while producing more severe side effects. Long-term use would be catastrophic. Permanent cognitive degradation, psychosis, eventually death." "So the Tauran's wonder drug is actually a ticking time bomb," Lee whistled. "No wonder they were in a hurry." "Exactly," Kwan nodded. "They need to achieve their objectives before the side effects become apparent. Once their enhanced leaders and scientists begin deteriorating, their advantage disappears." "Can you prove this?" Joe asked intently. "Absolutely," Kwan nodded. The molecular degradation pathway is clear once you know what to look for. Any competent xenobiochemist would reach the same conclusion. Joe turned to Jackson. This changes everything. If we can demonstrate that transcendence is self-defeating, the Taurons lose their primary justification for immediate action. Can we get this information to the Council quickly enough? Jackson asked. Better, Joe smiled grimly. We broadcast it directly to every Council race simultaneously. No diplomatic filters, no political considerations, just the raw scientific data. The Taurons will be furious, Thompson warned. They're already furious, Lee pointed out. How much worse could it get? Jackson made her decision. Do it. Quan, prepare the clearest possible presentation of your findings. Joe, arrange the broadcast. I want this information in every corner of Council space within 12 hours. As her team dispersed to their tasks, Jackson turned to the tactical display again. The Tauron fleets were moving with clear purpose, positioning for maximum strategic advantage. They were committed to their course. The question was whether scientific truth would be enough to stop them. The broadcast went out exactly as planned, reaching every Council world and outpost simultaneously. Quan's presentation was masterful, clear, concise, and irrefutable. The transcendence formula was fatally flawed, and any civilization relying on it was dooming itself to collapse. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Council chambers erupted in debate. Scientific communities across a dozen worlds confirmed Quan's analysis. The Tauron leadership found itself facing not just external opposition, but internal dissent as their own scientists verified the findings. 48 hours after the broadcast, the Tauron advance halted. 12 hours after that, their fleets began withdrawing to defensive positions. And 72 hours after the broadcast, Ambassador Nekrath requested a private meeting with Ambassador Joe on Harmony Station. Security was tight. Every corridor leading to the meeting room was guarded by both human and allied species security personnel. Jackson insisted on being present, along with a small security detail. Nekrath arrived alone, his towering gray form somehow diminished since their last encounter. Ambassador Joe, he began without preamble. The Tauron Imperium wishes to clarify its position regarding recent events. Joe maintained perfect diplomatic composure. We welcome any clarification, Ambassador. The deployment of Tauron forces was a scheduled military exercise, Nekrath stated, the lie transparent to everyone present. It has been successfully concluded. I'm pleased to hear it, Joe replied, not challenging the obvious fiction. Exercise or not, the movement of such significant forces naturally caused concern. Nekrath's pupilless eyes narrowed slightly. As for the compound your scientist analyzed, it was an experimental medical treatment, not a military application. The research has been discontinued due to unforeseen complications. Science is full of unexpected outcomes, Joe agreed mildly. Perhaps in the spirit of Council cooperation, joint research might yield better results in the future. The Tauron's expression hardened briefly before smoothing into diplomatic neutrality. Perhaps. The Imperium will consider all options for future scientific endeavors. What went unspoken was clear. The Taurons had been caught, exposed, and forced to retreat. But they were far from defeated. They were merely recalculating. In the meantime, Nekrath continued, the Imperium proposes a bilateral non-aggression pact with Earth, as a gesture of goodwill. Jackson and Joe exchanged glances. This was unexpected. The Taurons weren't known for extending olive branches. Earth would certainly consider such a proposal, Joe said carefully. Though as a Council member, we are already bound by mutual defense agreements. This would be more specific, Nekrath replied. A recognition of Earth's unique position within galactic politics. Ah, Jackson thought. Now it made sense. The Taurons had recognized humanity's potential as a wild card. Better to neutralize them through diplomacy than risk them aligning firmly with the opposition. We'll bring your proposal to our government, Joe assured him, and respond through appropriate channels. As Nekrath departed, Jackson turned to Joe. That was interesting. Very, Joe agreed. They're recalibrating their approach. We've moved from insignificant newcomers to potential threat in their strategic assessment. Is that good or bad? Jackson asked wryly. Both, Joe smiled thinly. Being underestimated has advantages, but being respected has its uses too. 3 months later, Jackson stood on the observation deck of the USS Defiant II, Earth's first fully human-designed interstellar vessel. Unlike its predecessor, which had been a hasty adaptation of reverse-engineered alien tech, the Defiant II represented humanity's own unique approach to FTL travel. Final system check complete, Lee reported from the pilot's console. All green across the board. Very good, Captain. Jackson nodded. Proceed when ready. This was an historic moment. The maiden voyage of a ship that incorporated lessons from a dozen alien civilizations but was fundamentally human in its design philosophy. Where most council races had specialized in particular aspects of space technology, humans had taken a more holistic approach, borrowing and adapting ideas from every available source. The result was a vessel unlike any other in the galaxy. Not the largest or the fastest, but possibly the most versatile, and certainly the most human. FTL drive engaging in 3, 2, 1. Lee counted down. There was none of the dramatic distortion or physical discomfort that accompanied most alien FTL systems. Instead, the stars outside simply stretched and blurred before resolving into new configurations. The transition was so smooth that Jackson might not have noticed if she hadn't been watching the viewport. Transit complete, Lee announced with a grin. Alpha Centauri system, right on target. Transit time, 14 minutes, 7 seconds. That's a new record, Admiral. Jackson allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. Well done, everyone. Status report? All systems nominal, the engineering officer reported. Power consumption well within projected parameters. Drive core temperature stable. This wasn't just a technological achievement, it was a statement. Earth was no longer merely adapting alien technology. It was creating its own path forward. And in doing so, it had accomplished something none of the Council races had managed in millennia of space travel. A genuinely comfortable FTL experience. It might seem trivial compared to weapons systems or defensive capabilities, but Jackson knew better. This was quintessentially human, finding a way to make the impossible not just possible, but pleasant. Admiral, the communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from Harmony Station, Priority 1. Jackson frowned. Put it through to my ready room. Moments later, she was facing Joe's concerned expression on a secure channel. We have a situation, Joe said without preamble. The Council is convening an emergency session. The Oceanic Alliance has evidence that the Taurons haven't abandoned transcendence. They've modified it to reduce the immediate side effects. Jackson felt her earlier satisfaction fade. So they're proceeding with their original plan, just more carefully. It appears so. Joe nodded. But there's more. They've specifically excluded Earth from the emergency session. On what grounds? Our probationary status. Joe's expression was grim. It's a technicality, but it allows them to discuss matters without our input. Several of our allies are protesting, but the procedural rules are being strictly enforced. Jackson considered this development. They're isolating us, preparing the ground for something. My assessment exactly, Joe agreed. The Taurons may have decided that Earth represents too much of a wild card. Better to neutralize us before proceeding with their larger plans. Neutralize how? Jackson asked sharply. They wouldn't risk direct military action against a council member. Not military. Joe shook her head. Political. There's talk of a special review of Earth's membership status, citing security concerns. Jackson understood immediately. They're trying to push us out of the Council altogether, remove our protection. Precisely, Joe confirmed. Without Council membership, Earth would be vulnerable to all sorts of diplomatic and economic pressure. What do you need from us? Jackson asked, her mind already calculating options. Come back, Joe said simply. We need to present a united front, and we need to demonstrate that Earth isn't intimidated. Jackson nodded. We're on our way. Defiant 2 should make quite an entrance. The Council chamber on Concordia Station was imposing by design. A massive amphitheater with seating arranged hierarchically based on each civilization's length of membership. As probationary members, Earth's representatives were seated near the bottom, a physical reminder of their junior status. Usually, this arrangement placed Earth's delegates behind several rows of more established civilizations. But today, as Jackson and Joe entered the chamber, a noticeable space had been cleared around Earth's section. It was subtle but unmistakable. They were being physically isolated as well as politically. Quite the welcome committee, Lee muttered as they took their seats. Stay sharp, Jackson replied quietly. But remember, we're here as diplomats, not soldiers. The chair being called the session to order, its environmental suit glowing slightly as it activated the chamber's advanced translation systems. This special session of the Galactic Council will now commence, it announced. The first order of business is the status report from the Transcendence Inquiry Committee. A representative from the Silicon Concordat rose, its crystalline form catching the light. The committee has confirmed that research into neural enhancement continues within Tauron space, despite previous assurances to the contrary. While the formula has been modified, the fundamental approach remains the same. Murmurs spread through the chamber as delegates conferred with advisors. The Tauron Imperium rejects these findings, Nekrath declared, standing tall. Our research is purely medical in nature, aimed at treating cognitive disorders. Any suggestion otherwise is an unwarranted intrusion into our sovereign affairs. The debate quickly became heated, with various factions taking predictable positions. The more militaristic civilizations sided with the Taurons, citing sovereignty rights. Those who had historically suffered from Tauron aggression demanded intervention. Through it all, Earth's delegation remained silent, observing the political currents flowing through the chamber. It was only when discussion turned to potential responses that Nekrath made his move. Before we consider council action, he said smoothly, we must address a security concern. Earth, our newest member, has demonstrated a pattern of behavior inconsistent with council norms. Jo tensed beside Jackson, but her expression remained perfectly composed. The Earth delegation obtained classified Tauron research through illicit means, Nekrath continued. They have engaged in unauthorized surveillance of council members. They have developed military technology without proper oversight. Now the murmurs in the chamber took on a different tone, with many delegates glancing toward Earth's section. In light of these concerns, Nekrath concluded, the Tauron Imperium formally moves for a review of Earth's probationary status, with the recommendation that it be suspended pending a full investigation. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices as delegates conferred urgently. The motion has been made, the chair being announced when order was partially restored. In accordance with council procedure, Earth's representatives may respond before the vote. Jo stood, the picture of diplomatic dignity. The council recognizes Ambassador Jo of Earth. Jo surveyed the chamber calmly before speaking. Esteemed colleagues, Earth acknowledges the concerns raised by the Tauron delegation. However, we find the timing of these allegations suspicious, coming as they do immediately after Earth helped expose continued Tauron work on transcendence. She paused, letting the implications sink in. As for the specific allegations, she continued, Earth operates within the same intelligence framework as all council members. We gather information, we analyze it, and we act on it when necessary for the common good. The exposure of transcendence was not an attack on the Tauron Imperium. It was a service to the council as a whole. Several delegates nodded in agreement, though many remained impassive. Regarding technological development, Jo added, Earth has complied with all reporting requirements for military applications. We invite inspection of any facilities council observers wish to see. This was a calculated risk. Earth did have some classified projects, but nothing that violated council regulations, at least not technically. The real question before the council today, Jo concluded, is not about Earth's compliance with bureaucratic procedures. It is about the future stability of our shared galaxy. Will we stand together against threats to that stability, regardless of their source? Or will we allow ourselves to be divided by those who seek advantage through division? As Jo returned to her seat, Jackson gave her a subtle nod of approval. She had reframed the debate masterfully, making it about principles rather than procedures. The council will now vote on the motion to review Earth's status, the chair being announced. The voting process was deliberately archaic. Physical tokens placed in a central receptacle, representing the original founding race's method of decision-making. Each delegation approached in order of seniority, placing their token to indicate their position. Jackson watched tensely as the votes accumulated. The Taurons and their closest allies voted for review, as expected. Several neutral civilizations abstained. But to Jackson's relief, Earth's recent allies, the Vespiri, the Silicon Concordat, and others, voted against. When the final tally was announced, the motion had failed by a narrow margin. Earth would retain its probationary membership status. Nekrath's expression was unreadable as the chair being concluded the session, but the rigid set of his shoulders spoke volumes. This setback would not deter the Taurons, it would only drive them to more subtle methods. As they departed the chamber, Lee leaned close to Jackson. That was too close for comfort. It's only the beginning, Jackson replied quietly. The Taurons won't give up that easily, and next time they'll be better prepared. So will we, Jo said with quiet confidence. Earth has survived its first real test of galactic politics. We've shown that we can't be easily isolated or intimidated. And we've made some genuine allies, Jackson acknowledged, though I suspect they supported us more out of self-interest than affection. In galactic politics, Jo smiled faintly. Those are often the strongest alliances. 6 months later, Jackson stood in the newly completed Galactic Affairs Center in Geneva, watching rain streak the massive windows overlooking Lake Geneva. Behind her, representatives from 17 Earth nations were engaged in heated debate over humanity's next steps in interstellar relations. The Taurans cannot be trusted, the Russian delegate was insisting. Their recent overtures are clearly designed to divide Council opposition. Yet we cannot reject diplomatic engagement outright, the Brazilian representative countered, especially when they're offering preferential trade terms. The debate had been ongoing for hours, with little progress toward consensus. Earth's complex internal politics were proving almost as challenging as galactic diplomacy. Admiral Jackson, the Chinese delegate called out, you've been uncharacteristically quiet. What is your assessment? Jackson turned from the window, considering her response carefully. As head of Earth's interstellar defense force, her opinion carried significant weight, but she was wary of appearing to dictate policy. The Tauran diplomatic offensive is consistent with their overall strategy, she said finally. When direct confrontation failed, they shifted to more subtle methods. These trade offers, technology sharing proposals, cultural exchange programs, they're all designed to create dependencies and divisions. Yet some of these offers would genuinely benefit Earth, the Indian representative pointed out. The medical technology alone could save millions of lives. I don't disagree, Jackson nodded. The question isn't whether these offers have value, it's what they'll cost us in the long term. Freedom of action, Jo supplied from her seat at the table. The Taurans are experts at creating golden chains, benefits that gradually become necessities until you can't function without them. So you both recommend rejection? The British delegate asked. Not necessarily, Jackson replied, but careful selection. Accept offers that increase our capabilities without creating critical dependencies. Reject those that would give the Taurans leverage over essential systems or resources. As the debate continued, Jackson's secure communicator vibrated. She stepped away from the table to check the message, her expression darkening as she read it. Admiral? Jo had noticed her reaction. Is something wrong? Jackson rejoined the table, her military bearing even more pronounced than usual. I apologize for the interruption, but we've just received priority intelligence from our GXRT contacts. The Tauran fleet is mobilizing again, not just their regular forces, but their reserve units as well. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Could it be another exercise? Someone asked hopefully. Unlikely, Jackson shook her head. The pattern is different this time. More dispersed, less obvious. They're trying to disguise the scale of the mobilization. Target? The American delegate asked bluntly. Unknown, Jackson admitted. But our analysts believe they're positioning for multiple potential objectives rather than a single target. It's consistent with preparation for a major coordinated operation. The Council must be informed immediately, Jo declared. This violates at least 3 provisions of the recent security accords. Our allies are already aware, Jackson confirmed. They're monitoring the situation closely. And Earth's defenses? The Russian delegate demanded. On high alert, Jackson assured them. But if the Taurans are planning what we think they are, this won't be a direct military confrontation. It will be a series of rapid, decisive actions against vulnerable targets across Council space, creating facts on the ground before an organized response can be mounted. Like Earth's colonies and outposts, the Chinese delegate suggested grimly. Jackson nodded. Among other targets, our newest settlements have minimal defenses. They would be easy pickings. Then we must recall our colonists, the Brazilian representative insisted. That would play directly into the Taurans' hands, Jo countered. It would signal weakness and retreat, exactly what they want. So what do you propose? The question came from multiple delegates simultaneously. Jackson and Jo exchanged glances, a plan they had discussed privately now requiring public articulation. A dual approach, Jackson began. Diplomatically, Earth formally requests emergency council intervention, citing specific intelligence of Tauran treaty violations. This forces other civilizations to take positions. Neutrality becomes harder to maintain. Meanwhile, Jo continued, we accelerate deployment of our new defensive systems to all Earth outposts and colonies, not just the military installations, everything. The expense would be astronomical, the British delegate objected. Less expensive than losing those colonies, Jackson replied flatly. But there's a third component as well. She activated the room's holographic display, showing a complex diagram of overlapping spheres representing various civilizations' territories. The Taurans are expecting council paralysis, she explained. They believe the bureaucratic process will delay any meaningful response until they've achieved their objectives. So we change the equation. With a gesture, she highlighted several key points on the display. Neutral systems positioned strategically between major power blocks. We've been developing a joint rapid response force with our closest allies, she revealed. Small, mobile units capable of reaching these critical junctures within hours of a Tauron move. Not enough to stop them, but enough to ensure that any aggression would immediately involve multiple council races. Tripwires. The Russian delegate nodded approvingly, ensuring that isolated aggression becomes impossible. Exactly, Jackson confirmed. The Taurans want to pick off vulnerable targets one by one. We make that strategy unworkable. The room burst into overlapping conversations as delegates debated the proposal. It was risky. Placing human forces in potential conflict zones could be seen as provocative, but the alternative was waiting passively for the Taurans to make their move. After hours of debate, a consensus emerged. Earth would pursue all three components of the strategy: diplomatic pressure, enhanced colonial defenses, and strategic positioning of rapid response forces. As the meeting concluded, Joe joined Jackson at the window. Outside, the rain had stopped, and late afternoon sunlight was breaking through the clouds. "Do you think it will work?" Joe asked quietly. Jackson considered the question. "I think it gives us a fighting chance. The Taurons are counting on Council indecision and Earth's isolation. We're denying them both." "And if they call our bluff?" Joe pressed. "If they move against our forces anyway?" Jackson's expression hardened. "Then they'll discover something important about humans." "What's that?" "We don't bluff." 2 weeks later, the USS Defiant II hung in space at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system, its advanced stealth systems rendering it virtually invisible to conventional sensors. Jackson stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display as Tauran vessels moved into position around the system's outer planets. "They're setting up a blockade pattern," Lee observed from the pilot's station. "Classic encirclement, cutting off approach vectors." "Status of Proxima colony?" Jackson asked. "Population 1017, the tactical officer reported. "Minimal defenses, just a basic shield generator and a handful of security personnel. They're completely vulnerable." Jackson nodded grimly. Proxima Centauri was Earth's first extrasolar colony, established less than a year earlier. Its strategic value was minimal, but its symbolic importance was immense. Humanity's first permanent foothold among the stars. And the Taurans knew it. "Communications? Any response from the Council yet?" Jackson asked. "Still deliberating, Admiral," came the frustrated reply. "Emergency session is in its third day of procedural debates." "Of course it is," Jackson muttered. The Council's bureaucratic paralysis was proceeding exactly as the Taurans had anticipated. "Tauran vessels are launching smaller craft," the censor officer announced. "Troop transports most likely. ETA to Proxima Colony approximately 17 minutes. Jackson made her decision. "Battle stations, prepare to break stealth." The bridge crew exchanged glances but moved with professional efficiency to comply. They had all known this moment might come, the moment when observation turned to intervention. "Admiral," Lee said quietly, "once we reveal ourselves, there's no going back. The Taurans will consider it an act of war." "They crossed that line when they moved against our colony," Jackson replied firmly. "We're not starting anything, we're responding." She activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is Admiral Jackson. In a few minutes, we will be engaging Tauran forces to defend Proxima Colony. You all know what's at stake here. Not just the lives of our colonists, but the future of humanity among the stars." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "We are outnumbered. The Taurans have brought a fleet to intimidate what they expected to be a defenseless colony. But they've made a critical error. They assumed that Earth would wait for Council permission to defend its own people." A resolute silence filled the bridge as the crew awaited her orders. "We will not fire first," Jackson stated clearly. "But we will position ourselves between those transports and our colony. We will make it clear that any attack on Proxima is an attack on Earth itself, and if the Taurans choose to pursue that course, we will respond with every capability at our disposal." "Course plotted, Admiral," Lee reported. "Ready on your command." Jackson took a deep breath. This was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy, not as supplicants seeking permission, but as equals demanding respect. "Execute," she ordered. "Take us in." The Defiant II's stealth systems deactivated, and the ship surged forward at full power, its advanced propulsion leaving a brilliant energy trail visible across the system. It was a deliberate show of force, announcing their presence in the most dramatic way possible. Positioning between Tauran transports and Proxima Colony, Lee reported as he executed a perfect high-velocity insertion maneuver that placed the Defiant directly in the path of the oncoming vessels. Open a channel to the Tauran flagship, Jackson ordered. All frequencies, maximum broadcast power. I want everyone in this system to hear this. The communications officer complied, and Jackson stood tall as the channel opened. Attention Tauran vessels. This is Admiral Tessa Jackson of the Earth vessel Defiant 2. You are approaching an Earth colony in a manner consistent with hostile intent. You will halt your advance immediately and withdraw your forces from the Proxima Centauri system. For several tense moments, there was no response. Then the main view screen activated, showing the familiar stern features of a Tauran commander. Earth vessel, you are interfering with a legitimate Council security operation. Your presence is unauthorized and your demands are rejected. Remove yourself from our path immediately. Jackson smiled without humor. I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Commander. There is no legitimate Council operation in progress. The Council is still deliberating. You're operating without authorization, and you're threatening Earth citizens. Your colony was established without proper security protocols, the Tauran countered. We are simply enforcing Council regulations regarding vulnerable outposts. With an invasion fleet? Jackson raised an eyebrow. That's quite the inspection team you've brought, Commander. The Tauran's expression hardened. This is your final warning, human. Remove your vessel or be destroyed. Jackson stood perfectly still, her voice level. Before you make that decision, Commander, I should inform you that this conversation is being broadcast to every Council member. I suggest you check your long-range sensors. We're not alone. The Tauran commander's eyes widened slightly as his tactical officers frantically reported new contacts appearing throughout the system. Earth's allies had arrived. Vesperi carriers, Silicon Concordat battleships, even GXRT trading vessels converted to carry defensive systems. You see, Commander, Jackson continued, when Earth makes friends, we take it seriously, and it seems our friends feel the same way. A new voice joined the channel, Tsekt of the Vesperi. The Council has reached a decision, Commander. All Tauran forces are ordered to stand down immediately. Your security operation has been officially classified as an act of aggression. The Tauran commander's expression remained stone-like, but Jackson could see the calculations happening behind those pupilless eyes. Fight and trigger a full-scale galactic war, or retreat and live to fight another day. We will comply with the Council's decision, he said finally, but this matter is not concluded. It never is with you people, Jackson replied with a tight smile. Safe journey home, Commander. As the Tauran vessels began withdrawing from the system, cheers erupted across the Defiance bridge. Lee spun in his chair, grinning widely. They blinked. This time, Jackson cautioned, though she allowed herself a small smile. There will be repercussions for this. The Taurans don't take humiliation well. Let them come, Thompson growled from Tactical. We'll be ready. Jackson gazed at the tactical display as Allied ships moved to protective positions around Proxima Colony. This was just one skirmish in what would likely be a long, complex dance of power politics, technological development, and occasional shows of force. The Taurans would regroup, adapt, and try again with a different approach. But something fundamental had changed today. Earth had proven itself not just technologically capable, but politically adept, able to build alliances, leverage diplomatic channels, and project military power when necessary. They had demonstrated that humans wouldn't be passive players in galactic affairs, waiting for permission to defend their interests. Admiral, the communications officer called out. Incoming transmission from Geneva. Priority 1. Put it through, Jackson ordered, expecting a reprimand for acting without explicit authorization. Instead, the screen showed the Security Council chamber erupting in applause. The Secretary General stepped forward, beaming. Admiral Jackson, on behalf of Earth's united governments, I commend you and your crew. You have defended not just our colonists, but our place among the stars. Jackson nodded acknowledgement, a weight lifting from her shoulders. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. We were just doing our job. And doing it remarkably well, the Secretary General added. I believe a certain phrase has begun circulating among our alien allies. Something about humanity? Jackson smiled, having heard the expression from Tsekt during a private moment after a joint military exercise. Humanity, fuck yeah, she quoted, to gasps and then laughter from the Geneva chamber. Not exactly diplomatic language, the Secretary General chuckled. But it seems to capture the sentiment. Come home when you can, Admiral. Earth is proud of you. As the transmission ended, Jackson turned to her crew. "Well, you heard the man. Let's go home." Lee set course for Earth, the Defiant's revolutionary drive activating with a gentle hum rather than the violent lurch of conventional FTL systems. As the stars blurred around them, Jackson reflected on the journey that had brought humanity from being extorted by a purple blob in a trash can to defending their colonies against one of the galaxy's oldest powers. It had been one hell of a first year in space. The Taurans had tried to extort humanity, expecting easy prey. Instead, they'd awakened a species that refused to be bullied, that learned with astonishing speed, and that faced challenges not with fear but with determination and occasional irreverent humor. Humanity, fuck yeah indeed. The Council had tried to extort humanity, but humanity's reply had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, and this was just the beginning. The end.